Hello and welcome to The Wargamer. Now you're joining me as I take a look at some more Silver Tower miniatures, and this time I'll be showing you how to paint the half arachnid, half grot Scutlings, and as always I'll be using the Citadel range of paints to do so. So here we have the Grot Scutling I'll be painting in this tutorial. Now I've primed it using a grey spray primer. This is personal preference, as I found it's quite easy to paint some of the lighter areas such as the skin and also the legs on this miniature if you've got a lighter base coat, but if you've got a darker one you should still be able to do it anyway. Now the first task in painting this miniature is to paint the black areas. It's going to be the robe and the hood here. Normally I would recommend painting it inside out, so I'd normally recommend painting the legs first and then the jacket and then the actual robe itself. But painting a black area first is generally preferable to painting light areas, because if you overspill light onto black you can easily cover it up, but if you overspill dark onto light it's a lot more tricky to cover up. So for painting the black areas, we're going to be starting off with a base coat of Abaddon Black, followed firstly by a highlight of Eshin Grey, and then finally Dawnstone. So I've watered down the Abaddon Black slightly, just to give it a lot better coverage over the surface here, especially the large areas, and then when I actually come to painting some of the detail areas I'll reduce the amount of paint on the brush. But as you can see here, it's pooling really nicely, and then once this layer has been applied, I'll be applying a second layer over the top, allowing the first layer to dry thoroughly first though, and this will give us a really nice and even coverage of Abaddon Black in which to build up from in the later steps. With the Abaddon Black base coat completed, the next step is to start highlighting the edges of the cloth here. I'm using the Eshin Grey, which is quite a dark grey, so it will be quite a subtle highlight. I'm just dragging the brush gently along these raised sections of cloth along like so. Mixing in just a small amount of water here will really assist you in dragging the brush along these sections. You want to focus mainly towards the top as well and really enhance the detailing in the cloth. The final step in highlighting the black areas is to use our Dawnstone. This time we only need a very small amount along the tops just to pick out some of the fine highlights. So for example, along the top of the hood here, I'm just going to be gently applying a small amount of Dawnstone along the folds, much like we did before, but this time again just concentrating on the folds towards the top of the miniature, and this just really enhanced the effect of light hitting these folds and reflecting off. With the robe completed, we can now start working on the skin of the Scutling. Now we're starting off with a base coat of Elysian Green, followed by an initial highlight of Nurgling Green, and then finally highlighting with a Krieg Khaki. Once we've done all those highlights, we'll then be washing over the entirety of the skin with a Thonian Camo shade. So the initial step is to apply the base coat of Elysian Green over the skin areas. Now this should cover really easily if you're using a grey base coat like I am here, but if you're not, then you could always just mix in some water and apply several thin down layers just to give you a really nice and even base colour that you can build up from. So I'm just being careful not to apply it too heavily. I wanted to make sure it's just a nice thin coat, and so I've just mixed in just a small amount of water. I'm using a wet palette here, so it really helps out. And when you actually come to paint around the robes here, just be careful not to overspill, but if you do, you can quite easily correct it. As you can see, the Elysian Green has given us a really nice bright green colour in which to build up from. Now the next step is to start highlighting these edges and details using Nurgling Green. So I've got a small amount of Nurgling Green on my brush here. I'm just going to be picking out some of these features. So I've got the knee there, the ankle, and especially around the face, you're going to be wanting to focus quite a lot of detailing around here. Again, just mixing in a small amount of water will really help to blend in the two colours from this highlight and the base colour, and also help to improve the flow of the paint on the brush. You can see I'm painting across the nose there, just on the chin as well. I'll be painting around the lips and also the cheekbones as well, anywhere where we've got some really pronounced details. The final step in highlighting is to really pick out some of the very pronounced details using Krieg Khaki. Now we want to only very lightly apply this layer. We don't want to overpower some of these highlights. I'm focusing on the bridge of the nose here because it's angled towards where you'd imagine the most prominent light source will be coming from above, and I'm just going to be picking out the cheekbones as well, just a small amount of Krieg Khaki, and then also anywhere you would feel that would be more pronounced, such as the knuckles, just on the hands there, and just along the backs on the ankles as well. Now the final step in painting the skin is to lightly wash over the entirety of the skin with a Thonian Camo shade. Now I've mixed this into 1 part water to 1 part Athonian camo shaders. Don't want to be applying too thick of a wash. And we're applying this over all of the skin, and what this will do is it'll pull into the recesses. It'll really bring out and enhance those details, especially around some of the feature heavy areas such as the face here. But also tie in the few highlights that we're applying in the previous step. So you can see it's just a very subtle highlight and making sure that it's applied evenly across the entirety of the skin. With the skin completed, the next step is to paint some of the leather areas. This includes the quiver and also the leather strap just on the forearm there as well. We're painting these areas, first of all with Rhinox hide, followed by a first layer of Doomball brown, before finally highlighting with Scrag brown. For this step, I'll be using the Rhinox hide, and we're applying this over any leather areas. In this case, it's going to be the quiver for the arrows. Just being careful around the areas we've already painted. Now this is a base coat, so it should cover really nicely, but again, just mixing in a small amount of water won't harm the application of the paint. With the base coat drying, the next step is to pick out the folds in the leather using the Doomball brown. This gives us a really nice reddish tinge to the leather. We want to just drag the brush very carefully along these edges. Mixing in water into your paint will really help to control the flow of the paint, and if you do overspill a little bit, you can easily wipe it off if it's thinned down. So you can see here I'm just picking out the stitching, and I'll be doing this across the miniature where I painted the Rhinox hide in the previous step. The final step in painting the leather areas is to apply some very fine and targeted highlights of Scrag brown. Now this really finishes off the red leather effect, gives the effect that some areas are faded and worn, and we're using this just a small dots along the areas that we painted before, especially around where the stitching is here. This will give us some really nice worn leather effects. With the leather areas completed, the next step is start painting the wood areas, and this includes the bow, the teeth, the nails, and also the claws on the feet as well. They'll be starting off with a base coat of Gorthor brown, followed by a wash of Agrax Earthshade, before finally highlighting with Baneblade brown. Now if, like me, you're using a grey primer, the base coat of Gorthor brown should cover really nicely over the grey. But if you're not, then applying a few thin layers should really help getting a nice and even coverage. And again, just make sure you mix in some water to get those thin layers to the consistency that you want. Following the base coat, we now want to apply the wash of Agrax Earthshade over the paint, and I've mixed in quite a bit of water here, roughly 1 part water to 1 part Agrax Earthshade, as we only want a very subtle wash. If we apply too much at this stage, it'll darken down the wood colour more so than we want it to, and we just want it to pull in the recesses at the moment, and just to enhance some of the detailing that we've got on these sections. The final step in painting the wood and bone areas is to very carefully pick out some of these raised sections using the Baneblade brown. Now I've got a small amount on my brush here. I'm just going to be individually picking out some of these toenails. And this will give us a really nice, gnarly, dirty nail look, and especially on the teeth as well. Okay, this really nice overall rotten teeth effect. As you can just see, I'm picking out very carefully the individual teeth. With the wood areas of the miniature completed, the next step is start painting any stitching and also the wrap around the bow as well. Now we're starting off with a base coat of Rakkar flesh, followed by a wash of Seraphim sepia, before finally highlighting with the Ushabti bone. So using a thin brush, I'm going to be carefully picking out the stitching on the quiver here, being careful not to overspill into the areas we've already painted. Just a light touch like so. The same when we actually come to paint the wrap around the bow. We don't want to overspill into the areas we've already painted, be it the hand or the wood areas. So just be very careful at this stage, and don't forget to mix in a small amount of water with your paint, just to improve the flow slightly. Following the base coat, we now want to bring out some of the details we started off in the last step with just a wash of Seraphim sepia. Now just carefully applying this over the surfaces of Rakkar flesh we applied in the previous step, being careful not to let it spill onto the areas we've already painted. We don't want to affect the colour tone that we've got on those other areas too much. Just be careful when you apply it, just use a small amount on your brush, and don't apply it too thickly either. We only want a very subtle wash over the surface just to bring out those details. Next, we'll be highlighting the stitching using Ushabti bone, and again, just be very careful with the application. You want to leave the darker sections still visible in the recesses, and this will create the illusion of shadow across the surface. Again, anywhere you've painted the Rakkar flesh and Seraphim sepia wash, you'll want to paint in this stage as well. With the stitching completed, the next step is to start painting the eyes and also the feathers on the arrows themselves. We'll be starting off with a base coat of Corn Red, followed by a wash of Nuln Oil, before finally highlighting with Evil Sun's Scarlet. With the corn red, we just want to apply a base coat over the arrows, and just being careful again not to overspill onto the black areas in this case. But if you do overspill, you can quite easily cover this up with a bit of bad and black. Now the corn red is a base paint, which means it will cover really nicely over the grey primer, but if you're using a black primer, then you might have to apply a couple of thin layers just to get that really nice even coverage that we want to start off with. So now that we've applied a nice corn red base coat, we're going to be applying a Nuln Oil wash over the surface. You don't want to be applying it too strongly here, so I recommend mixing in a small amount of water, maybe 2 parts Nuln Oil to 1 part water. All we want to do at this stage is just to make sure we get a small amount of shading into these recesses around the feathers. We don't want to darken the colour too much. The final step in painting the red areas is to carefully pick out some of these individual feather strands using the Evil Sun's Scarlet, and you can see I'm just applying a small amount to these tips here. If you're not comfortable in doing that, you could just apply a solid line down the length of these feathers instead, and that'll still give you some nice definition of detail and really bring out the depth of colour in these arrows. The next task in painting our Grot Scuttling is to paint the cobwebs that adorn the robes here. We'll be starting off with a base coat of Celestra Grey, followed by a highlight of White Scar. For this step, you'll want to use a very thin brush. I'm using my Army Painter character brush for this step, and you want to very carefully drag your brush along these raised sections. Now mixing in some water will really help in this stage, and just having a small amount of paint on the tip of your brush will also help to prevent you overspilling. But the sections are quite raised, and as long as you're gentle enough, you shouldn't have much problem with overspill. Now using the White Scar, we want to pick out some of these strands of the web, just very carefully again using a thin brush, just a small amount of paint on the end. Now I'm going to be focusing mainly on the actual thicker sections here, and this will give us some nice definition between the two different colours. Rather than just having a very flat surface, we have a slight variation in colour. With the red areas of the miniature painted, the next step is to start tackling the metal areas. So we're going to be starting off first of all with the silver metal areas, notably the sections on the bow, the blades, and also any arrowheads on the miniature. We're starting off with a base coat of lead belcher, followed by a wash of Nuln Oil, before finally highlighting with Stormhost Silver. If you're looking to create a dark, soot blackened metal effect on your miniatures, then lead belcher acts as an excellent base coat. It is a base colour as well, which means you should cover really nicely over your primer, in this case the grey primer. But we want to make sure we get a nice even coverage of paint, so mixing just a small amount of water for this stage will really help in getting this really nice smooth coverage for the base layer. With the base coat completed, the next step is to wash over the lead belcher areas using the Nuln Oil wash. As you can see here, it's pooling into the recesses and really enhancing this dirty black metal effect that we're looking to get. It'll really bring out those details, especially in the blade as well. And now I'm just going to carefully apply it to these sections on the bow. And when you're doing this, make sure you don't overspill onto the areas we've already painted. We don't want to wash too darkly on the wood section. We want to keep them quite light so they contrast nicely against the dark metal. The final step in painting these silver metallic areas is to use some Stormhost Silver to achieve a sharp edge blade. So what we're going to do, using a very thin brush here with Stormhost Silver, I'm going to be focusing this along these edges here, using a motion which drags the brush perpendicular to the actual blade itself. And what that does, that will create this scuffed metal effect. It will really create this razor sharp effect on the blade, making it very cruel looking indeed. You can also use the Stormhost Silver to bring out some of the detailing, such as this ridge that runs along the blade there, and also on any other metallic areas on the miniature. The final area to paint on this miniature is any ornaments that are dangling from the scuttling. In this case, we've got this small gold spider that's hanging from the web there. Now we're starting off with a base coat of Retributor armor, followed by a wash of Seraphim Sepia, before finally highlighting using Stormhost Silver. If you've already seen a few of my tutorials, you'll know I really like using Retributor armor on my miniatures. It's a really rich gold, which is perfect for these kind of base coats. So just be very careful with this paint, as you are quite close to some of the areas we've already painted. We don't want to overspill at this stage, because metallics can be quite difficult to paint over. So use a thin brush with just a small amount of paint on the end, and that'll give you the best control possible. The Retributor armor has given us a really nice bright gold base coat. We want to really bring out some of those details. So first of all, we're going to be applying a wash of Seraphim Sepia over the surface, and this will enhance the colour, as you can see as I apply it across the spider legs there. It really brings out those individual details in the gold. It gives us the gold a nice burnished colour as well. The very final step in painting the gold is to use the Stormhost Silver, again like we did in much the same way for the metal areas. Which once you pick out some of these details, just enhance them slightly with the Stormhost Silver, just a very light touch over the details such as the legs here and also the spider's abdomen as well. This just really gives it a really bright and shiny gold colour. And here we have the completed Grot Scutling, who you can see I've also based using the exact same techniques as I used in my Silver Tower basing tutorial. Let me know what you thought of this tutorial in the comments below, along with your suggestions for future videos. Additionally, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider supporting me on Patreon and liking my Facebook page, which you can find links to both in the description below. So until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.